So welcome everyone. My name is Tamara. I'm the president of Afro UPRIS, the Black Democratic Club of Santa Clara County. This is the candidate forum for San Jose District 5. And thank you for joining. Thank you for everyone who submitted questions. Thank you for the candidates who are here. I'm going to pass it over to our other Afro UPRIS membership leaders to introduce themselves. Sabrina?
Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Sabrina Monet-Lamontagne. I am the treasurer of Afro UPRIS. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Basil, and I am the political director of Afro UPRIS.
All right, so thank you so much, everyone. We will be moving our candidates to panelists in just a moment. And just for everyone's reference, I'm also going to put the agenda, the format of this in the chat, so you can keep up with what we're doing. So there's that in the chat. And I'm going to look for our welcome people. I'm going to look for our candidates so I can move you to panelists. So be on the lookout for that. Okay, welcome. Alrighty, so we're going to start with introductions from each candidate. And we'll start with Nora, and I'll give you 2 minutes, and I'll give you a warning at 5 seconds, and then we'll go to Peter.
Good evening, and thank you for having us here to share with you what I hope to do in City Hall and to share with you the work that I have laid the foundation for when I started my journey in serving on the City Council the first time in 2001, 2010. And then when I went to the State Assembly, the work that I did around social justice and equity is something that I'm very proud about. The interesting thing is that I started my journey a while back, and to be having come full circle on the work that I so enjoy doing to improve the quality of life for our community, but also to make sure that we create an even playing field, whether it was moving forward on the pay equity bill for women and women of color in the State Assembly, whether it was moving forward to make sure in the public safety budget that we were designating money for women of color and men of color to make sure that there was a line item so that we could fund our nonprofits to help our communities. I worked on affordable housing in the assembly, but also on the local level. When I started, we had a goal of producing 10,000 affordable housing units. And I am so grateful and proud that I was able to build 3,000 affordable housing units. And out of those 3,000, we also created some purchase housing for individuals that were willing to live here and that wanted to live here, and made them affordable. And I'm hoping to be able to share with you some of those creative ideas as we think about that. Also building a community that is rich in diversity and that continues to make sure that we can thrive in this valley.
Thank you. And then Peter.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank Afro UPRIS for the opportunity to share about myself and my work in this community. My name is Peter Ortiz. I'm currently the president of the Santa Clara County Board of Education and a candidate for San Jose City Council, District 5. I'm not someone who was ever supposed to hold elected office or even make it out of the school to prison pipeline. I'm not the type of person who has made my career in local politics or built my wealth in getting individuals elected. I'm running for city council as a grassroots community organizer who'll be a steadfast advocate for our working people and our residents of East San Jose. I come from a working class home and from a family that was both impacted by domestic violence and gang activity. Luckily, I was able to overcome these barriers, which I attribute to being raised by a selfless and resilient single mother who raised me and my brothers on her own here on the east side. In fact, it was watching my mother struggle, which ingrained in me a passion to give back to my surrounding community and to make sure that those in our community, regardless of their age, their demographic, their zip code, or their nation of origin, had opportunities to thrive. Our campaign for city council is rooted in economic justice for the families of East San Jose and is calling for a people first economic package that will focus on the public safety of local residents, allocating resources to address our broken roads and our blighted neighborhoods, and the activation and beautification of our major business corridors, which are all along East San Jose. I'm honored to have the endorsement of the South Bay Labor Council, Santa Clara County Democratic Party, the League of Conservation Voters, and Councilmember Carrasco, and I look forward to partnering with this club.
Thank you. And while you're up here, I'm going to ask you the first question, Peter. So in the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020, many people became outspoken for the needs of the Black community. How have you honored a commitment to Black Lives Matter? 2 minutes.
Excellent. Thank you so much for this very important question. You know, as an elected official, a community organizer, and a grassroots activist in East San Jose, I have led from the front line really on issues pertaining to racial justice and economic justice for our loved ones in the Black and African American community. You know, I strive to be an ally to the Black community, and my commitment to this has taken the form of marching here in the streets in San Jose for racial justice, calling into city council meetings to advocate for the investment of city funds to empower the Black and African American community, as well as my advocacy within the education system to prioritize intervention over the criminalization of our Black and Brown students who are disproportionately suspended and passed through premises because of my commitment to this movement as I championed the first ethnic studies resolution in this county so that we could establish a county-wide ethnic studies curriculum task force, right? To make sure that every school in Santa Clara County, every high school made it a requirement for their students to learn about African American studies, Chicano American studies, and Asian American studies. There's still a lot of work to do. You know, I'll be the first one to say that, but I look forward to partnering with this club and the leaders of this community to ensure that when I'm on the city council, the city budget is made with an equity and racial justice lens.
Thank you. And Nora, same question. In the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020, many people became outspoken for the needs of the Black community. How have you honored a commitment to Black Lives Matter?
I have continued to be a part of the movement for communities of color, and especially for the Black Lives Matter movement. I marched when we were at City Hall when it first happened. And I think we were all very saddened when we were watching the TV when the injustice was done to George Floyd. And I think that we all know that that movement rised with where the injustice that had been living within this within the United States of America. And I think that as I think about my work, when I was on the city council, we continued to put measures in place to make sure that minority businesses and Black businesses, as well as Latino businesses, got the resources they needed so that they could thrive. Because if there's one thing that I truly believe, and if our communities of color, our Black community and our Latino community, if they're ever going to have generational wealth, it is upon us to create an infrastructure so that they can reach that. No one asks for a handout, but we should be giving a hand up. And other things that I did when I was on the city, assembly, is I mentioned to you that when I was there, I created infrastructures and line items as I worked with my assembly colleague, Joan Sawyer, who at that time was chair of public safety. And we created line items so that we had boys and men of color items where we gave $100 million, as well as girls and women of color, $100 million, so that that money would be a line item in the state of California budget, so that our nonprofit communities could actually be able to fund those to carry on the work that is important.
Thank you. Next question. Black people want to stay housed in our community, but it is the larger systemic issues that are preventing them from staying. For example, lack of access to affordable housing, lack of living wages, lack of generational wealth. How can we prioritize keeping Black residents in San Jose, many of whom have called San Jose their home for generations? 2 minutes.
Should I go first?
Oh, yes, sorry, you.
Okay, that's okay. I think this is an important question for everyone to be answering. And so thank you for asking this question. As I shared with you, I have been working on housing for the past, since 2001, and maybe even before that as an advocate. And one of the things that I want to make sure that we move forward with when I get on the city council is to create a department within the housing department that just focuses on affordable housing, because I think that we need to streamline it so that we are making sure that it is moving quickly and getting built quickly within the city of San Jose. I think the other things that we need to explore, and whether it means at the state level or if we can do it on the local level, is have local preference, meaning that people that live in this community should have first right to be able to purchase an affordable housing or rent an affordable housing unit. That is very important. And there are many ways that we can think about this and being creative to make sure it happens. We've been talking about it, people have been talking about it, but we haven't really put the efforts to make it a reality. So the law needs to change so that we can continue to move forward in making sure that people can stay here. If this is where they want to live, they should be able to afford to live here. The other thing that I want to share with you is I've always been at the forefront, whether it was the minimum wage campaign when that started here in San Jose, making sure that we're creating the pipeline so that we can make sure that our population have the ability to be able to have one job. And that means having a living wage to be able to work here. And I also worked really hard at the state level to take that statewide, and we were successful. So I'm going to continue to make sure that jobs work for the community here and that they have housing.
Thank you. And we're going to go to Peter for the next question. Or sorry, for the same question. Black people want to stay housed in our community, but it is the larger systemic issues that are preventing them from staying. For example, lack of access to affordable housing, lack of livable wages, lack of generational wealth. How can we prioritize keeping Black residents in San Jose, many of whom have called San Jose their home for generations? 2 minutes.
Thank you for this extremely important question, which is an issue that affects many of us, especially our working class families in East San Jose. Communities of color have been impacted by the discriminatory policies of the past. Redlining, exclusionary zoning have resulted in fewer opportunities for our communities and families of color. I will make a commitment, when I'm in public office, to advocate for our government to center racial equity across all agencies and systems, as well as the policies that I introduce when in office. As the youngest candidate in this race and as a renter myself, a major piece of my campaign is to prioritize anti-displacement and renter protection policies to prevent the upheaval of our families. Now, I represent a voice that's very much not represented in our local discourse, and that's our working people who grew up here, right, who lived here, who work here, but due to the cost of living are unable to see a future here. Silicon Valley is experiencing a housing affordability crisis that has led to unprecedented levels of homelessness, the displacement of our families who have lived here for generations, and the cleansing of our diverse cultural neighborhoods. I will advocate for our city to implement inclusive housing policies to mitigate the displacement of residents and create opportunities for families to live and thrive in our city. I want to develop a program to intentionally target city affordable housing funds for investment in communities of color to ensure housing sustainability in these traditional communities of color. I want to amend the increasing protections such as the renter protections such as the apartment rent ordinance, which will ensure that working class renters are not displaced. And the production of new affordable housing throughout our city will enable people from all income levels to have a place called home. My office will also champion a tenant.
That's time. I forgot to put my hand up. All right, next question. According to the 2019 San Jose Homeless Census and Survey Report, San Jose has a 3% Black population, but 19% of unhoused people are Black. How do you plan to provide services and resources to the unhoused community that will result in Black people getting housed in San Jose? 2 minutes, Peter.
Great, thank you. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I have I have a different pathway to public office. I come from a position with personal experience. I myself have been homeless. I know what it's like to be forced to sleep on a park bench here in District 5, and I know what it's like to experience housing insecurity and be vulnerable to crimes and to the elements. Many of us have lived paycheck to paycheck, and in several situations have been a hospital bill or a car repair bill away from being put out on the street. At the end of the day, our current city approach to the houseless community is ill-placed. Right now, we're moving the houseless community from street to street when our end goal should be getting them the housing that they need and the shelter that they need, as well as to provide those with mental health services and drug and alcohol abuse counseling that they deserve. We cannot have them out in the cold where they're going to continue to pass away due to the elements. I'm supportive of the community plan to end homelessness, which is approved by the county and offers a comprehensive list of land and policy solutions to address and support the homeless community. But we also have to have the important discussion around long-term permanent supportive housing for our homeless population. Without creating this permanent housing, we're not going to solve this very serious issue. In the interim, short-term transitional housing, such as safe parking programs, temporary housing opportunities are all important and immediate solutions. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be a one-pronged answer. It's going to take multiple solutions and multiple commitments from everyone to get our community housed and the services they need. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will switch it to Nora.
Thank you for this question. I served in the state assembly in 2015 is when I passed a bill, which was the tiny homes, which removed all the red tape so that we could put temporary housing for our unhoused population and our homeless. And what that did is it created these tiny homes where individuals could actually live and come as they please, and yet have wraparound services, whether mental health services or job preparation. Because it's important that we create an infrastructure for our unhoused population so that they can get back on their feet. And when I created that, I didn't realize that when Governor Newsom got in, and because we went to the pandemic, that he would take those best practices and move it throughout the state of California. I do want to share with you that since that bill has been implemented here in the city of San Jose, we've been able to create and build 600 tiny homes or unhoused units to house individuals. The importance about that is that we can take those best practices because we know that the policy works and use it for other types of housing, because it is important that we are able to create not just temporary housing, but permanent housing for our population. And you mentioned about how do we make sure that we are housing our communities of color. Well, I think it's important that we figure out how we create policy that will actually move our populations that have lived here and that may not be making the salaries that our tech communities are making. In East San Jose, we see that. I also believe it's important that we create high density housing on transit corridors. And that's important too. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to the next question for you, Nora. According to the California Healthy Kids Survey in the school year 2017-2018, 74% of Black students don't believe that police make them feel safer. How do you plan to make schools safe for Black students? 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, I think one of the things that I will do in respect to the school districts and also the board that Peter currently sits on is that to bring us all together around a round table and bring individuals that have been working with our youth population to understand why they feel this way. Because one thing that I have learned in my years of being on the city council and in the assembly is that communities don't really care, don't really appreciate when government tells them what they need when we don't go to them and ask them what you need. We saw that in the pandemic when government was they were trying to assess what communities of color needed. And we see that a lot. So I would create a roundtable where we would bring all the entities together as well as the police department so that they can be at the table and understand why our youth are feeling this way and start moving policies that would be implemented hopefully on the school boards as well as in the city of San Jose so that we can move towards more training for officers and also training for and funding for an infrastructure that would be able to provide a safe, respectful infrastructure for individuals that may not feel safe within their school district. At the end of the day, if our officers need more training, and that's cultural competency, then they should be getting that. And if there is not funding for that, then we need to figure out how we're funding that. Because no child should feel unsafe on their campus and should not feel that they can go to a police officer, whether they're on campus or off campus. The other thing that I think is important, we need to do community policing so that we build trust within our communities with the police officers. Thank you.
Thank you. And then now we go to Peter, same question.
Great, thank you. I've been and will continue to be a strong advocate for the students of color, including Black students within our public school system. As a trustee for the Santa Clara County Board of Education, it's been a goal of mine to support grassroots movements in my community, in my trustee area, that advocate to invest in Black and Brown youth safety and academic empowerment. And I've gone on the record speaking at board meetings and rallies in support of these groups. I've been a vocal proponent of the implementation of restorative justice practices and positive behavioral intervention systems as an alternative to the criminalization of our students, and will advocate for as many barriers as possible to be put in place between our youth and the criminal justice system. At the end of the day, the schools need to be an inviting place for our youth, and in many cases, our students lack a safe place for them to be themselves and express themselves. That is why I'm grateful that our Office of Education has partnered with the state of California to implement across our county, with 4 being in my trustee area, a wellness center focused on mental health support for students. These wellness centers strive to establish a place where our students can come when they are feeling stressed, emotional, or unsafe. And we'll have trained professionals present and support them with the services that they need for their well-being. I hope to see this program expand, and I will personally advocate for this program to expand so that all of our students in Santa Clara County are supported regarding their safety and their well-being.
Thank you. We're going to stay on you for the next question. Oh, sorry. Over the past 5 years, no San Jose police officer has been prosecuted for killing someone despite 19 fatal encounters with the police, ranking San Jose #1 in the Bay Area for fatal encounters with police. How do you plan to hold SJPD accountable? How do you plan to prevent brutality of Black people? 2 minutes.
Thank you for this extremely important question. One of the avenues in which I got my start in local advocacy and as a grassroots organizer was around criminal justice reform and police community relations. I was a brown man who was born and raised in East San Jose. I have personally bared witness to the injustices that exist within our criminal justice system, and I'm aware that we have a long way to go when it comes to accountability, oversight, and racial justice here with the city of San Jose. I truly believe that focusing solely on our police department and our past approaches to public safety is not the solution for our future. Police officers, as it is currently, have too many expectations for them for their role in public safety. We expect them to be soldiers, social workers, alcohol and drug counselors, mental health professionals. We must continue to explore opportunities for alternative emergency response systems that would deploy, for example, mental health professionals or other essential responses in emergency situations. Police are not marriage counselors and cannot take the place of city-funded domestic violence and other preventive measures. So we need trained experts for those situations. As council member, I will also support the Independent Police Auditor's Office and empower them to both have the ability to recommend policy to the city council, but also have access to data. I'll ask our police chief to make annual reports on racial equity issues that pertain to arrests, police-involved shootings, hiring practices, and other measurements of performance to ensure that we are measuring racial justice within our decisions made within the San Jose Police Department.
Thank you. Now we're going to switch to Nora. Same question.
Thank
2
you.
minutes.
I think I want to probably lead with the independent police auditor. When that was implemented many years ago, the whole idea was so that it could be independent to make sure that if there was an audit of the police department or there was concerns that people felt they had a safe place that they could go to that was independent from the police department. If that department needs to be revisited, I would hope that as a council that we could revisit it and see how it is operating and if they need additional resources. The other thing is that we know that our police department has lost 207 police officers since 2010. And I think that when you ask a department that is already stretched to also be counselors and be able to determine mental health without having all the resources that they need, then we're asking too much and it almost becomes impossible. So to look at how we can create a department or additional resources within the police department that maybe handle the mental health component. I also would bring back the advisory board that I was chair of that had to do with domestic violence. When we had all these different departments that actually worked together with their counterparts, we were able to address many issues that affect our communities within East San Jose. And I think it is important that we have these infrastructures that work side by side with each other, hand in hand with each other to address issues that affect our communities. Thank you.
All righty, thank you. And we'll go to the next question with you, Nora. According to the 2021 Silicon Valley Pain Index, Black adults are 6.6 times more likely to be given a local infraction by the SJPD as a result of non-traffic stops, 6.6 times more than white adults. For example, things like loitering, smoking in the park, shopping cart possessions, and having open bottles. What are your plans to reverse the disproportionate criminalization of Black people? 2 minutes.
Well, thank you for that. I think we know those statistics and they're pretty alarming if they're the highest percentage when we know that our population is, people of color and our Black brothers and sisters is 3% in this valley. I would work with the council and hopefully the chief of police to be able to figure out why that is happening. And maybe it's an independent audit to figure out why that is happening. And I think it's important to know where it's happening. When I was on the city council, gangs was a big issue within our community. And it was important for me to understand where the gang activity was happening within the city of San Jose. Because if we're talking about racial injustice, it is important for us to know where those numbers are. And so we worked really hard to figure out where that was. But I also think it's important, and I'm going to go back to this, that I think it's important for us to have community policing. When I was on the city council, we had community policing, where police officers were at every neighborhood association, they walked the beats, they got to know the neighbors, and people felt comfortable. So if they saw something happening and it was somebody in the community, they would ask them, hey, do you know this kid or do you know this individual? And we also had a community panel, which actually addressed a lot of those issues. And I'm hoping that we can bring some of the good practices and best practices that we had back then, but training our police officers, understand them being culturally competent, and also understanding where this is happening in what neighborhoods, so that we can get to the root of the problem and the root of the issue of our community that is maybe targeted inappropriately and injusticely.
Thank you. We're going to switch to Peter now. Next question. Sorry, same question. According to the 2021 Silicon Valley Pain Index, Black adults are 6.6 times more likely than white adults to be given local infractions by SJPD as a result of non-traffic stops. For example, things like loitering, smoking in the park, shopping cart possession, or having open bottles. What are your plans to reverse the disproportionate criminalization of Black people? 2 minutes.
Thank you so much for this question. And the numbers are extremely shocking, but unfortunately, they're not surprising if you're a person of color who lives here in the city of San Jose. In order to begin to address and explore avenues to address the disproportionate criminalization of our brothers and sisters and loved ones within the Black community, I think that our city can look at similar routes to that of the city of Berkeley, who last year, in an effort to address the same issue, disproportionate overrepresentation in police stops, the Berkeley City Council voted unanimously to reduce the number of police-involved stops for low-level issues like expired registrations and other small violations. Instead, police in that city are now directed to conduct stops only for violations that endanger public safety, such as excessive speeding, individuals running the red light, running a stop sign, driving under the influence, or blatantly breaking the law. I believe and will support our city studying this decision and see if it makes sense for our own municipality. This would then relieve some of the work that's on our police department plate in order to free up their time to focus more on the important issues, while also hopefully providing relief to our community and address some of these disparities within citations.
Thank you. Next question. There is a long and rich history of Black community here in San Jose. What is your economic plan to work with the Black community to empower and promote generational wealth? How would you support opportunities for first-time home buyers, entrepreneurship, housing assistance, and other community assistance? 2 minutes.
Who's that question for?
Yeah, we're going to go to you first.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for this question. Intergenerational wealth is an extremely important issue and truly makes a life of a difference for our communities of color. And I know especially for our Black community. I've long been an advocate for the empowerment, the economic empowerment of communities of color, whether it was on my time on the board of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, where I would go to the state capitol advocating for entrepreneurs of color, to locally being on the Alum Rock Santa Clara Street Business Association's board, and actually one of their co-founders, to make sure that they had advocacy and representation here on the local level. At the end of the day, our city has had many advocates for big business, but very few for small businesses or for local communities of color owned businesses. The city should make it a priority to invest in the entrepreneurial power, of our communities of color, our immigrant populations, many here in the east side of San Jose, but really citywide, in order to create and establish this intergenerational wealth, as well as creating jobs here for local residents. The number one employer in the city of San Jose is small businesses. So there's a need to make sure that we are developing a program intentionally for the cultivation and sustainability of small businesses in communities that have been traditionally impacted by systemic racism and past racial policies like redlining. Many of our small businesses have been hit hard by COVID and need direct support from our city in order to stay afloat. Another issue is our entrepreneur community is confused about how our city works, especially our entrepreneurial communities of color. So providing support could look like funding small business outreach programs to engage our businesses and communities of color to navigate these many systems.
Thank you. Nora, same question.
Thank you. I think one of the things that we all are learning about generational wealth is rooted in the Black community. The community has been talking about this for years, and they have literally been moving forward to create that. What hasn't been happening in this city is that we haven't created an infrastructure to make both of the things go hand in hand. I know that generational wealth also starts by someone being able to own their own home. So it's important that people are able to buy a home here in this valley. We know that people can take their equity from their home and put it into their dream of owning their own business. But it also is important for the city of San Jose to create those programs and that pipeline where they're able to put resources towards individuals that want to start a business here in the city of San Jose. And I have worked for the past, many years on making sure that the city, as well as the state of California, are investing in our minority businesses and creating infrastructures, whether it is making sure that there is funding for minority businesses to be able to tap into that funding at the city and at the state level, whether it's our minority chambers being able to have the resources so that they can advocate and work with the minority business owners. It is important that we provide staff that can actually work with our minority businesses to help them maneuver a system that sometimes isn't very friendly to individuals that are just trying to move their lives and create their businesses. So I will work to make sure that we have stronger infrastructures at the city of San Jose for minority businesses.
Okay, thank you. So we're gonna bring both of you back onto the spotlight, and we're gonna do a lightning round of yes and no questions that Basil will facilitate for us.
Oh, okay, lightning round. Do you support a gross receipts tax or progressive tax in San Jose?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you support the removal of school resource officers from schools?
Yes.
I do not. I think I would leave that to the school districts to make that decision.
Do you support an alternative to the mayor's gang prevention task force?
I personally would need more information about this, but I'm open to have a conversation about it.
I would, if we could do a program that is similar to, I'm on the board of Advanced Peace, and they're in Richmond and Fresno and Stockton, and I think they're doing a phenomenal job around that. So if we could create something that's moving on that path, I would.
So to clarify, the answer to that is both of you guys are open to potential reforms.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Do you support decriminalizing the unhoused community?
Yes,
Yep.
And the last question is, do you support increasing funds to San Jose Police Department?
Yes.
yes.
Okay, I'll turn it back over to Ms. Tamara.
Thank you, Basil. Thank you for answering those questions. We do have one question that one of our members submitted that came in a little later. So I'm going to ask this question. We'll start with Nora and then go to Peter. So new housing requires additional water for those residents. Low flow toilets are already being used also, most people have not watered their lawns in over 5 years due to water restrictions and fines. However, new housing residents will still need water for showers, washing clothes, drinking, and dishwashers. What ideas do you have to remedy the water shortage in San Jose? Nora, 2 minutes.
Oh, thank you. I think one of the things that we need to think about, and it's not an easy thing to do, but reclaim water, and that's the purple pipelines. And I know we could do something like that, but it would take quite a bit of funding to actually move forward on that. But I think that's an avenue that we need to actually address. Recycling our water is important. So that would be my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Peter, same question.
Great. No, that's a major question that's impacting a lot of our families. I would advocate, and this is also a huge ask, but work in partnership with the building trades in the state and as well as our local water district to develop a sustainable water infrastructure to make sure that we are also implementing comprehensive planning structures that, ooh, my alarm is going off, sorry about that. Comprehensive water reducing structures to make sure that we're retaining as much water as possible. I'll also support financial incentives to residents to install rain water harvesting systems, making local water systems more resilient. It will also provide residents water rebates for passive water harvesting at their local home. Thank you.
Thank you. We just got another question. So I'm going to ask it. It's from the Q&A. Thank you to one of our participants. Do you support giving the independent police auditor full power to subpoena police records? And do you support a Citizens Police Review Commission? 2 minutes.
Who would you like to start?
You can go first, Peter.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm 100% for, and I included this in one of the question answers that I made, allowing the IPA to have the opportunity to request police documents and police data. In many cases, my time as a grassroots organizer, I saw that the IPA was an independent police auditor in name only. And unless we're giving them the authority to do these, to make these recommendations, like policy recommendations, or have access to data, they won't be able to do their job in an effective manner. And yes, I do support a citizens, I think it's advisory commission. I was going to say that, but I ran out of time earlier.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go to Nora, the same 2 questions. Do you support giving the independent police auditor full power to subpoena police records? Do you support a Citizens Police Review Commission? 2 minutes.
I think it is important for the independent police auditor to have all the information that they need to be able to evaluate, and they'll also make recommendations to the full council from their report, because I know that when I was there, they reported to us yearly on recommendations. So I definitely believe that they should have access to data and reports and files so that they can do their job effectively. Regarding the civilian review board, is that what you asked me, correct?
Yeah,
I-
Citizens Police Review Commission.
Yeah, I believe that they had embarked on that. I don't know why it didn't happen. But yes, I believe that there should be, if we could move forward with that, that would be a good asset for the community as well.
Thank you. Now we'll go to you, Nora, for closing statement. I'll give you 1 minute.
Thank you for this opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts and for you to share questions that are important to your group. As you mentioned earlier, what was my involvement with the Black Lives Matter and where would I be? I think it is important for us as a community to embrace every group that lives here in this valley and to uplift them. And I have stood with my brothers and sisters in the Black community since the day I can remember. My father was a part of the Cesar Chavez movement, the farm worker movement. He organized with Cesar Chavez. And I believe that it is important for us to stand with our brothers and sisters through whatever struggles that we are going, because we all face the same struggles. And so I am running because I know that my voice and my leadership will be valued in moving this district forward. I'm hoping that you will consider supporting me, and I'm supported by Dave Cortese and the Labor Council. And thank you.
Thank you. Now, Peter, 1 minute closing statement.
I just want to thank Afro UPRIS for this opportunity to share about myself and my vision for East San Jose and the city as a whole. Many of you know me, many of you know my work, and I've met a lot of you during my journey as a grassroots organizer, advocating for the working families and communities of color who have long been left out of the political struggle here in the city of San Jose. You know, I've been an advocate for this district way before the cameras, way before the newspapers were paying attention to this race. Our residents, they deserve someone who's going to fight on their behalf, someone who cares about this city and has a track record of advocating for its residents when, you know, the media isn't watching. I represent the working families and the small businesses of District 5 and them alone. I want to be clear. You have my word that I'm going to be accessible and that I will make all my decisions in partnership with the residents of my district and with communities of color and neighborhood leaders. When local Black leaders reach out to me, I will always prioritize answering that call. Thank you.
Thank you both. We appreciate your time being here in this space. And so feel free to add your information for your respective campaigns into the chat for those of us who are here in the space so they can connect with you later. So thank you everyone for participating, for listening, for being here as part of the Afro UPRIS District 5 Candidate Forum with Peter Ortiz and Nora Campos. This recording will be added to YouTube for our members to review and given time to vote on, and we will determine endorsement after that. And so if anyone has any questions, you can email afrouprise@gmail.com or visit our website, afrouprise.com. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.